the Writer Talks. Apparently, Oscar Wilde's famous last words were, "This wallpaper and I are fighting a duel to the death. Either it goes or I do." Typically witty and ticklish, isn't it? Except that it was tragic as he said this while Oscar Wilde suffered acutely from food poisoning. But the travesty did not dull his spirits, nor did it induce gloom. My guest today, Avijit Sarkar, the Indian-born, Sydney-based writer, poet, cartoonist, musician, puppeteer, blogger, and painter, has the same outlook. In his recently published Coronavirus Files, a collection of cartoons and illustrations, Avijit embodies the same wit, sharp observations, and incisive indictments of human idiosyncrasies. He is self-effacing and gentle in his interactions, but he can create quite a laugh riot through his writings, as seen in his short story collection, A Turn of Events, and in his essays published on his blog. He shares an irresistible piece from How to Be an Indian Social Outcast during the course of our interview. This apart, his collaborative venture with Dr.Santosh Bakaya resulted in the collection of short stories entitled Tall Tales, which, along with his short stories, also contains his illustrations. Avijit has been a musician for 45 years now, adept in singing various styles, and has shared the stage with legends such as Ghulam Ali, Abida Parveen, Anup Jalota, and the Ilk. The Australian government awarded the Australia Day Award 2020 for his contribution to arts and culture. In 2021, he was featured in a book entitled Success Stories of Indo-Australians, a collection of 50 inspirational life stories. He has also been endorsed by the Australian Performing Rights Association as a music composer. In 2020, he was also awarded the Golden Mars Award by the Significant League for Excellence in Satire and Humor. He is the founder-director of the Natraj Academy that trains new music talents. He also has an e-magazine, The Mind Creative, a monthly publication catering to creativity. Besides these, Avijit has trained under the renowned exponent Meher Contractor and is an established puppeteer who has had participations in several international drama and puppetry festivals. So let's dive in and watch this immensely talented genius who believes that, and I quote him, art is a way of life. Here are a few samples of Avijit's cartoons wherein he's paying tribute to his idol, Mario Miranda, the iconic Mario Miranda. Riveting, isn't it? He shares more of these during the course of our interview. But before we dive into the interview, please like, share, and subscribe to the Writer Talks so that we can continue such rewarding literary interactions with brilliant writers from across the world. I hope you do enjoy watching me talk to this soft-spoken creative genius, Avijit Sarkar. Until next week, stay inspired, smile, keep that sense of humor, and take care. Ahoy! Ahoy! Welcome to the Writer Talks. We have with us a very, very distinguished, highly decorated Australia Day Award decorated Indian living in Australia, Mr. Avijit Sarkar. Welcome to the Writer Talks, Mr. Avijit.
Yasha, thanks for having me.
It's truly an honor to meet you, and as promised, I will refer to you by your first name, and we'll go with that.
That's good.
All right. Now, I mean, you're somebody who believes, and I'm quoting you, that art is a way of life, and you have such an eclectic, multiple interests, and you actually epitomize being multifaceted in more ways than one. And your mastery extends from writing to painting, puppeteering, singing, composing music, and being a cartoonist. Is there anything that you still haven't tried as yet?
Well, life is only so much, and there are a few things I haven't done yet. I don't think I'll be able to, but yeah, there's always something that we want to do all the time, something new.
Right. We'll definitely continue talking about your writing, your craft, your writing process, and all of those things. But let's first dive into this first segment, which is called the Rapid Response segment. Now, I will be asking you a series of questions, about 5 or 6 questions, and each question will have a couple of options, and you will have to pick one of the options and briefly explain why that is your choice. But the caveat is that you cannot deliberate on that, it has to be instantaneous.
Okay.
Your quick choices. Ready?
Yep.
Okay, so let's begin. So, between these two iconic Indian cartoonists, R.K. Lakshman and Mario Miranda, what would be your choice?
Mario Miranda.
Right, and why is that?
And because he has influenced my style of illustrating and cartooning, and you will see his shadows, his style in when I display a few things. Yeah, always has been very inspirational for me.
Absolutely, yeah. I was spellbound when I a couple of years back when I went to this museum that's completely dedicated to Mario Miranda in Goa. So really, really marvelous. All right, now the second question between the legendary Ghulam Ali and Abida Parveen. Let's say you have the choice to perform with one of them. What would be your choice?
Ghulam Ali.
And why would that be?
That's because I've performed with both of them.
Right.
Okay, when Ghulam Ali traveled in Australia, I traveled with him. I played the harmonium with him and keyboards with him. Same thing for early 90s. Abida Parveen came here and I traveled with her. But Ghulam Ali's style suits me because I'm more into ghazals than what Abida Parveen is. Of course, she's amazing, but Ghulam Ali is my choice.
All right. I think that kind of obviates my next question, but still I'll go ahead and ask you that. Between folk music and ghazal, which would be your choice?
Ghazals. Primarily because I am driven by poetry. And so ghazals is the foremost thing because poetry drives me into music.
Fair enough. Now, let's say you have a limited number of hours and you have these 3 choices and you can choose only one of them between singing, painting, and writing. What would be your choice?
Painting. It's because one thing, while I'm painting, I don't need to face an audience. That's very important for me to have some time for myself. Painting gives me more time to think. What I cannot express in writing and music, I've always expressed in painting.
All right. Now, between traveling and puppeteering, if you have to pick one of the two.
Traveling. I'm a big traveling fan, so I've traveled to all corners of the earth, but yet so much to see. So much.
True, true. Absolutely, absolutely. I just hope that we get through this pandemic at the earliest. This is really, it's like chained us all, right?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
All right. Thank you so much for being such a sport. And that was lovely and so well interpreted. Let's begin by talking about the distinction, your prestigious award, the Australia Day Award for your contribution to arts and culture. I won't ask you how it feels. I think that is to stay. I would ask you what has changed post receiving this award last year. I think you were decorated with this last year in 2020.
Yeah.
So after having received this award, what has changed?
First of all, it came as a big surprise to me. When I was selected in the finals, that itself was a surprise. And the people who were selected with me, they had such huge credentials that I thought, okay, being selected for the finals itself is good enough. But on the day, when they announced my name, it was amazing, actually. I never ever thought that I'll get that award, to be honest with you. And it was given for arts and culture. And it really shook me up, really. Surprised and quite spellbound. After the award, the biggest realization was that Australia truly is a society that tends to recognize everyone. Things are changing and things have changed. And my award itself, I think that signifies that the society is shifting now in Australia. They are recognizing people of all ethnic backgrounds. And that was a proud moment for me. Very proud.
Fantastic, and we are really honored that you you have been decorated with such a huge award.
Thank you.
Now, from having your master's in pure mathematics and then working as a software engineer to being such a renowned artist and setting up the Nataraj Academy, I'm sure it must have been not merely an inspiring journey, but really a journey, a huge, humongous journey. What were the high points of this journey?
The high points were, well, it's like this: the mathematics, moving from mathematics, pure mathematics to software was a natural progression for me. So that was a highlight, that I stopped teaching mathematics, doing research, and moved to writing software, which is a natural progression, I think. But for me, it was a high moment. And I came to Australia because I was a software engineer. I was brought in here, and the highlight, the journey. Look, I always believe that imagination is the basis for all mathematics at a particular level. So when you're doing abstract, imaginative, theoretical mathematics, it's all about imagination. So it's the same for all creative pathways. Your imagination drives you to write, to paint, to do whatever you want, music. So I think there is this commonality between mathematics and the creative arts, that it's all here in your mind. The highlight here was, of course, 13 years ago I established Nataraj Academy, because I wanted to not look. I don't consider myself to be a teacher. I'm a student still. I'll always remain a student. But the idea of Nataraj Academy, and a highlight for me in my career, because I established that to share knowledge. When I teach there, I learn at the same time. That I think is a great thing for me in this journey.
Very interesting, and I like the connection that you drew between mathematics and art. Yeah, absolutely. Imagination is required in both fields, and I think it stems from.
There's an interesting thing I must tell you, that when I got my migration visa to Australia, this was in 1990. It was 30 years ago more. I actually gave away all my instruments, musical instruments, gave away to friends, because I thought, I'm going to Australia, nobody knows me there. I may not know music at all, so I had my harmonium, and all my musical instruments were given away to friends. And when I came here, strangely enough, I was just walking down somewhere and somebody recognized me back from India. And somebody said, oh, and then I came across a gentleman or some friends who were there. I'm from Ahmedabad. And they were from Ahmedabad, and they said, of course, you're the singer, isn't it? I said, yeah, I used to sing. So they said, why don't you come and do a little mehfil at home? I said, oh, all right, okay. So, and that's how the music also got its visa with me, into Australia.
That's so beautiful, and it's such a small world. You never know how destiny takes you places. Amazing.
Incredible, yeah.
Now, when and how did you become interested in cartoons? I know that you're again a pro at illustrations, and you've done so much and such beautiful work. How did you become interested in this?
I have been drawing since my mother used to say that, look, my son started drawing before he could talk. So I used to scribble. I've been scribbling since I was little, a child, and I've been drawing, illustrating a lot on my own. In 1984, it was at 83, I was working for Times of India in the IT department. So I was looking after the computer department in Ahmedabad, and during lunch hour, I used to just sit down and scribble. One of the editors saw me scribbling. He said, you draw cartoons? I said, yes. So he said, how about drawing a few cartoons for us? At that time, in Times of India, there was a publication called the Midweek Montage every Wednesday. So he published, so my first cartoons got published in Times of India in 83, 84.
Do you still have them with you?
Yeah, I've got a few photographs of those somewhere lying with me.
That's great. Could you share that, please? Do you have it?
I'll have to. I don't have it here with me.
Right.
But I'll send you a copy of 83. I've got a photograph lying somewhere. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Now, I know you did speak about Mario Miranda. So Mario Miranda is your favorite cartoonist, and then when and how did you chance upon this? How did you get interested, and did you study the craft? And what do you think is that what would you say, one particular trait that a cartoonist ought to have that sets him or her apart?
Hmm. I often tell my students that if you want to be a cartoonist, you don't see, you observe. There's a difference. So when you are in a scene, you're watching a scene or watching people, you observe carefully, and that's very important. Unless you do that, you won't be able to draw cartoons, because cartooning is nothing but an exaggeration of your observations. So you need to pick up those things. I like Mario's study of human beings and his craft. If you look at his cartoons and illustrations, the detail that he puts in at every corner, it is truly mind-boggling, I think. And I feel that he is an underrated cartoonist, even by world standards. It's always been.
Right. Yeah, he does have an iconic following, but then yes, I don't think we really know much about him. And, as you said, it's so profound.
It
His
is. It is amazing.
depiction of the way of life, especially about Goa, it's so profound.
Oh, so it's beautiful. Yeah.
Now,
Very, very, very.
now, I can understand that obviously you share a keen sense of humor, this flair for satire, all of this comes together, and naturally
Mm.
it unfolds in you being a cartoonist.
Yeah.
And should we
Yes.
talk about your recent publication, your collection of illustrations and cartoons, the Coronavirus Files?
Hmm. Yes. As I told you, I tend to look or find humor in every situation. It might be the most morbid situation, but I always see that's humanity. That's how it is. The way people look, they talk. So, and the same thing happened for when COVID hit, and I saw a difference, and I thought that this is getting a bit too serious, and I need to liven up or add a little bit of humor in people's lives. And I thought, let me draw a series of cartoons and maybe publish that as a book. And so I created this publication. It's a Kindle publication called the Coronavirus Files. And I'll just and the byline is that where humor is the only solution. So that's what it is for COVID. And you see it's happening now. Unless you learn to smile, you'll cry for a long time with COVID. So that's how I created those cartoons, a series of cartoons, and I published them on social media. And people said, just put them all together and put them out as a book, which I
Right.
did.
Would you be able to share a few of your cartoons?
Indeed, yeah. I'll share one which is what I call the family portrait after COVID. Just have a look. Let's see. There you are. So that's
Oh,
the standard.
my, that's lovely.
That's yeah. So even the dog there.
My
So
God,
yeah,
yeah, I think that's the high point. You're really making a statement with that.
that's the thing. The other thing is that when COVID hit, people were talking about the infection rate and the curve of infections, and people were saying that look, this curve needs to be flattened in all countries. The curve of infection, and I thought that there are some other curves that need to be flattened too. Okay, so
Absolutely.
have a look. Here, have a look at this.
Oh, sure.
You know that?
Yeah.
So staying at home, you have all kinds of curves floating around. So things like this, and put together some interesting stuff. People talk about social distancing, and people are not listening. So I went to a party and I saw this. So that's part of
Right.
COVID,
Oh,
where
wow.
people don't wear masks. They are at it without any restriction at all. And here, to be honest with you, if you study this cartoon, you will see how I get my inspiration from Mario's observation of
I
the
was
world.
about to say, I was wondering if you would take offense. The minute you shared this, I thought I could see I could see it resonate with Mario Miranda's works, and it's such splendid detailing. I really love this. I think this is one of my favorites.
So
Amazing.
so it's set of all these cartoons that I created, and I made a promise on social media that whatever money is made out of, like from most of my other creative avenues, every cent I'll donate to charity from this book.
Right. So when you're doing this, when you're cartooning, how do you go about this? I mean, do you take a mental picture, or do you actually take a picture and then try to work that out later on? How is it that you
No, I take mental pictures in terms of if there's a situation of a room full of people. I sort of observe them and sort of take a photograph in my mind, if you know what I mean. So I just look at pictures and look at people and a situation, and then what I do is I go back and think about it. So what's humorous in there? Some mannerism of a person or a person looking at another person. So that kind of stuff, and then I do a few rough sketches, and then finalize it. I do a lot of sketching on paper, but I also use a lot of digital media. I've got digital easels. They're like paper, but you draw and all stuff. So that's the progression. But like any other creative thing, I believe most of the work for me is all done here first. If I'm composing music, I think about music or that composition or a tune before I touch the harmonium. So same thing for painting, I guess, or cartooning. Yeah, the same thing.
Now, what about Tall Tales, your collaborative work with Dr. Santosh Bakaya? How did
Mhm.
that happen?
Well, I've been working a little bit with Santosh for a while now, because I did some illustrations for a book, Oh Hark, and I enjoy doing it. And she's so expressive in her writing that is great. When let me give you an example. When somebody comes to me saying that this is a piece of poetry, can you compose the music for it? If the poet is good, then my workflow is much better. If the poetry is nice, same thing for Santosh. When she writes, it's so nice that drawing is much easier for me. So that's how. And we said, look, I've done some illustrations for you. How about now we write together? And so this book came forth, and we thought we'll put together some light-hearted material. So mostly mine are all funny and stuff like that. So that's how it came about.
Right. Could I request you to do a book reading from
Sure.
your favorite section
Sure.
from Tall
Well,
Tales?
I was there is this is where I put on my glasses. Excuse me.
No problem.
Now, there is one short thing I wrote there. How to become an Indian social outcast. There are many things you can do, and if people are interested, they should follow that. That's a guidebook for them. Now, one I thought was to show a complete disregard for cricket. If you do that, you're ostracized from society. Slowly.
Absolutely.
Not that I hate cricket, but as I said, that I start off by saying that I do a quote from George Bernard Shaw, and I say that baseball has the great advantage over cricket of being sooner ended. So that's what jolted me up. And then this is this part of I just quickly read this. I realized the importance of cricket within the community a couple of years ago. This was during a lunch at a friend's place. I was sitting next to a rotund gentleman, an acquaintance from the past. While I sipped on my glass of red, he was busy looking at his phone, as you always do. Suddenly he looked up at me and with a jerky movement. 264, he said. I nodded my head in assent. Yes, I said, it was a terrible and cowardly attack, wasn't it? This is the second one in Iraq in the last week. My neighbor shook his head. No, he said, in India. What? I stood up aghast. 264 for the loss of 6 wickets, said my neighbor. I sat down again as it dawned upon me that he was talking about a cricket score. Ah, I said, so there is cricket match somewhere. He looked at me as if he had seen a ghost. The look of disbelief then turned into a suspicious one. Are you telling me that you're not aware of a cricket match between India and Pakistan? I shook my head and I said, I'm sorry, no, I don't. The man looked at me for a few moments in disgust. He let out a noise that was a combination of a cough and a snort, and then quietly walked away. So this is the beginning. So if you want to be an outcast, and some people aspire to be social outcasts, then this is a good guidebook for you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, if you're not interested in cricket, definitely you're not in it
Yes,
at all.
yes,
And
that's
I
right.
think by the same yardstick, you perhaps have written or you would write. If you're not into arts, either singing or poetry, then you're not a Bengali, right?
That's right. Yes, yes, yes. That's right.
Right. Now, let's come to this other short story collection of yours, which has been so well received, and I think you raised about $17,000 towards cancer research. Turn of Events, your collection of short stories. How did you
Yes.
conceive this?
Uh, well, I had collected a lot of my short stories together, and I was just thinking of how do I find a publisher, like every author does. And I came across a gentleman, a friend of mine here. He's from South Africa, and he said, "Look, I've got a publisher who might be interested in your kind of story." So I sent it to him, and he read the stories and he loved it, and he said, "I'll publish it." He's from Adelaide, so that is how it and it came out, and I put together stories which are based on. So the characters are all Indians living in Australia, and the stories are most of them are serious stories, and it reflects, I guess, on the Indian lives in Australia and all kinds of lives, all kinds of characters. So this is how it all came together into a book
Right,
published a few
I
years
can see a lot of diasporic writing that has seeped into this particular collection. Now,
ago.
obviously, as you said, you have captured the trials and tribulations of Indians settling in Australia. Now, what do you think has been particularly challenging as an Indian for you, and generally for Indians? What do you think is particularly challenging to settle in Australia?
Well, the challenge is this. You see, when you move away from your country of birth, that is a major thing in life. It's a sea change of life. So all of us have faced immense amount of difficulties in the beginning. The second generation, my daughter, they don't have that problem. They are part of this society inherently, but you are not. When you come here, you're trying to be a part of this society, which is very hard, very hard. It's a different, you don't have many connections into Australian society. You don't talk their language. You don't think like them. So it's not only for Australia, but for America or the United Kingdom. And I think that is the biggest challenge, to make yourself feel wanted in a foreign country, in a new country.
Fair. Likewise, now, what do you think is easier, or rather, especially for Indians, what about Australia reminds you of home?
What about Australia?
Reminds you of
Uh,
home? Reminds you of India?
I think once you get to know Australians well, they are one of the friendliest lots, I can tell you, Australians, local Australians. And once you and get their friendship on hand, I think it does remind you of back home, of your friends and how you used to have friends and get together with them. Once you break the barrier, break the ice and get in, I think it's great. So that reminds you back at home. And of course, India also has got wide open spaces. People think it doesn't have wide open spaces, but it does have. India has a lot of wide open spaces at different places. The same thing for Australia, when you
Yes,
go out
so rich in
yeah,
nature and natural resources.
yeah, was quite amazing. Yes,
Right. Now, what is the context behind your being so involved in cancer research, raising charity?
yes. It's that 10 years ago, my wife, she was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she's a medical professional herself, and she, like it happens anything else, she looks at everyone else except herself. And then one day she just went for a normal checkup, and they say you have breast cancer. And so after that, that was a traumatic moment for all of us, many months. But she was lucky; she escaped. But then from that point onwards, we decided, look, whatever money or whatever we raise from my creative pursuits, Everything for writing, my concerts, everything should go to medical research, and specifically breast cancer research in Australia. So since last 10 years, we have been giving all the money away to cancer research in Australia now, and to a few other things, like I've done it for motor neuron disease, MNDs, and so on, but mostly for cancer research. Yeah.
That's really profound. So, that's, yeah, understand. Now, what impelled you to take to writing? When and how did you start writing?
Writing, probably I started serious writing much late in life, really. I have written bits and pieces back in India many years ago, but I kept them away, and I never thought I would write. I really didn't look at myself as a writer in those years. But later on in life, I started writing, and I found my niche in fiction more than anything else. I do write poetry. I've written a lot of essays, and I'm writing plays at the moment. But my strength is in writing fiction. It's the same thing, because I imagine a lot, and I think like characters in a painting or cartoon. The same thing happens to me fictionally. So fiction is, I write a lot of fiction. I love it. I love writing fiction.
And probably it gives you more space to think and write about and create your own world.
That's right. Writing is great. You write, you create your own worlds as and when you want. Yeah.
Right. Fair enough. Now, who are your favorite writers? Whom did you grow up admiring?
I have read a lot and many authors, but one person I used to read when I was young, Enid Blyton, I used to read her books
right.
as a child. Even as an adult, I now look back and I really marvel at her expressions and how she could hold a child or young adults into her book. Amazing, I thought, and looking back, I thought she must be an amazing writer. The other person that has inspired me a lot of my fiction is Agatha Christie, and I've read everything that she has written, everything. And the way she designs a character, the way she designs a plot, after all these years, you can go back and read the same book again and again.
Absolutely.
And that is I think, incredible from a fictional viewpoint. And the way she designs the plots, designs the character, it is a lesson in itself. As far as humor is concerned, P.G. Wodehouse is my inspiration. Wow. Yeah. So I've read everything, and it's hard to beat him when it comes to humor.
I completely agree with you. I think we have similar choices. My God, P.G. Wodehouse, absolutely. Yeah. I think he's one of the best humorists ever.
He's amazing. Yeah, amazing.
You feel Jeeves is around you. It's amazing.
I read some of these books. First time I read it just because of the book and the plot and the story I enjoyed. I go back to these books, and the third time I read them is for my education.
Right.
I analyze each statement, and I ask this question: why did she or he do this or say that? There's a reason, and I analyze that. It's like they're like lessons for me.
True, absolutely. There is a lot of cultural study that goes into it. I mean, he has such an acute observation of the English way of life during that period, and especially of the cock-a-snook that he makes towards these so-called entitled sections.
Incredible. That's amazing.
Beautiful. Yep. Right. Now, when do you write? Do you have a particular space, a particular timing, or you write just whenever news hits you?
Whenever, what I do is I write what I call synopsis. So if an idea comes to my mind, I quickly write down, I jot it down on my laptop or computer, a few lines so I don't forget. Or a plot comes to my mind sometimes. It can be a murder mystery, for example, and I see something and it comes to my mind, and I quickly jot it down. So I've got hundreds of pages of such jottings with me. So when I get the mood, then I pick up one of those jottings and then I start building the character, building the plot. But I keep on jotting all the time.
Right. Now, you also told me that you write poetry, and narrative poem is something that you particularly like writing.
Yeah. So I love.
Could you share one or two examples of your?
First of all, I must make the disclaimer. that I am not a poet. And I don't consider myself to be a poet, but
But I did come across some of your poems, and such lovely poems on, I think, on your blog. I did.
Yes, some of them are there on the blog. Yes, um, I'm essentially a storyteller. So whether I paint or I write music or I sing, um, I'm always telling a story. So the same thing for my poems. All my poems are like prose poems. They tell a story. I'll just read. I wrote maybe 5 years ago. I wrote a piece called "The Flood." Right. I'll probably give you an idea of my style then. And the poem goes like this: In the arid desert, the poor man sat under the scalding sun, and amidst the limitless wasteland, he looked down upon the burning sand, and a tear rolled down his withered face, dropping silently on the red, infertile ground. And lo, there was a flood in the land. The people called upon the great wise men from the mosque, the temple, the church, and even the synagogue, and huddled over an ancient table, they spoke in whispers hushed, and then shook their heads in wonderment, for they knew not the reason for the flood. The sagacious physicist, summoned from the sanctuary of knowledge, was joined by the crafty mathematician and the mysterious chemist, and huddled over an ancient table, they spoke in whispers hushed, and then shook their heads in wonderment, for they knew not the reason for the flood. So that's my style of writing in poetry. It is a narrative poem, and it's like a story with an ending. So I like
so high on imagery.
Yes, it is, and my poetry, like not many poets write this way. My poetry is like a story. It always has an ending, a particular ending, and a particular message to carry for society.
Are there any specific poets that you prefer over others?
I've read some classical poets in my time, like you do in college days and so on. But as I said, I've never looked at myself as a poet. But one person who did make me write this kind of stuff was Oscar Wilde.
What right.
So I read Oscar Wilde. I read him again and again, and he wrote a few, which is called poetry in prose or something that he called them, The Happy Prince and stuff like that. He's written a few, just beautiful. His wordplay is always inspired me to write this stuff. Oscar Wilde, I think I blame him for making me into a poet. Yes.
No, I think you're glad. Now, this is your 45th year as a musician, and I think you have some 1800 plus live performances to your credit.
Mhm.
And you have shared the stage with legends like Ghulam Ali, Abida Parveen, Anup Jalota, and
Yes.
several others like this. And you've composed music for Australian documentary films, radio, and theatre. What are your thoughts on this marvelous journey as a musician?
You see, music for me, it runs in the family. So my parents were musicians, and so it was easy. You see, because you're growing up listening to music all the time. Later on, of course, I learned music from my mother, and I learned rhythm from my father. My father was a rhythmist, so I learned both sides. I learned melody from my mom and rhythm. So that's how it all started. Then I did my, of course, training in classical music with ustads back home. So that's how I did. So that's how my musical journey started. And then I remember I'm essentially an introvert, if you, and I'm not a very outspoken person. So in college days, I remember my friend said, "Look, you sing pretty well. You might as well apply for the talent evening. In colleges you have talent evening concerts." So they pushed me into the audition, and I got selected. So my first song I went and sang. Fortunately, there was a producer sitting in the audience that day. Producers move around in India and pick up talents. So immediately after the concert, he approached me and he said, "You want to? I run concerts, professional concerts. You want to come and sing for us?" I said, "Of course, I don't mind doing that." So that's how it started. He was at the right place. I was at the right place at the right time. Some producer spotted me, and from then on, yes, it was constant concerts all my life in India, all my life here, doing concerts, a lot of concerts. Because I do all kinds of music. I do folk, I do ghazals, I do Western music, a lot of film music. So it's on and on and on for me.
So when you say film music, do you stick to the 70s and the 60s, the melodies of?
Well, yes. In Australia, there's a huge audience for old songs, old Bollywood.
Right.
So I do a lot of that stuff. But I also sing new songs. Recently, I sang, just as a demonstration, I did write a song from the 40s and 50s in Bollywood, and then I sang one by Avijit Sarkar. And so I do all kinds, but there is a huge audience here for old songs, big audience. And I still love my old melodies.
Fair enough. Any particular favorites that you have?
Well, I do a lot of, in terms of film music, I started my life singing songs by Hemant Kumar of the old times. I did a lot of that stuff for a long time. I sing a lot of Manna Dey's classical songs and all those old songs. In terms of ghazals, I do a yearly tribute to Jagjit Singh. So in Australia, so that I've been doing that for many years now. So in terms of ghazals, I sing a lot of his compositions, lots of them. Yeah.
In fact, I think ghazal is synonymous with Jagjit Singh now.
Of course.
That's the kind of I think he's etched with ghazal.
Of course, and he's responsible for bringing ghazals to the masses, and in a nice way. In a nice way, yeah.
Fair enough. Now, I also read that you trained under the renowned puppeteer Meher Contractor.
Mm-hmm.
How did you get interested in puppeteering?
Well, it was like it's a strange story, to be honest. When I was in year 7, I was selected to do a play, a children's theatre. It was a play about all children, all kids there. And there are a couple of people from an academy in Ahmedabad. You know, Mallika Sarabhai and Mrinalini Sarabhai.
Right.
So they had their Darpan Academy in Ahmedabad, where Vikram Sarabhai started that. So there were some people sitting there, and they saw my acting, and they said, "Look, they approached my parents and said, can we train him in acting?" My parents said, "Of course you can." So they took me there, and so they said, "Come in the evening and train in theatre with us." And now I was in year 6 or 7, and it gets boring, for a child sitting there reading scripts. So as I was reading a script, in the next room, I saw this lady doing a puppet. She was handling a marionette, a string puppet. And I kept on watching, and I was so fascinated. I went back home and I told my parents that, take me out of theatre. Can I go and learn that stuff from that lady? And so my parents said, all right, if you want that. So they went there and took me there. And that lady was Meher Contractor. She was a legend in her lifetime in terms of puppetry all over the world. She's one of the pioneers of puppetry. And from year 7 onwards, she took me with her, and I was with her till 89, doing puppetry and learning how to make. And I traveled with her overseas, few countries, and she introduced me to the world puppetry. She took me to France, and I performed there with her, and I realized what puppetry is, how big it is outside India. It's like a full theatre. It's a different. And so that's the story of puppetry. I loved it, and I owe a lot to Meher Contractor. She was wonderful.
Again, what is that one really important trait that one needs to have in order to be a good puppeteer? What do you need to bear in mind?
The one thing that you need to do, your physical actions have to be transported into a puppet. So that's an art that you learn.
Right.
So I might be shaking my hands while talking to you, but when I have a puppet in my hand, I need to make that puppet shake the hands exactly like a human being does. So that's the art that you learn, and that fascinated me. Also, I've realized that it's a great tool for children, for education. Children, I realize that they may not listen to human beings, the parents, for example, but they do listen to puppets.
Right.
You see, and so is the thing for when you go into the rural sectors of India, and you talk about family planning and all that. It's not, if human beings talk, they feel a bit embarrassed, they feel a bit awkward about it. When you do it through puppets, they sit there and listen. So that's things like that. It's just quite incredible.
And it's a powerful visual medium, I think, and
Very, very
also
powerful.
disarming.
And if you see puppet theater in places like Paris and Germany and Russia, and they have taken it to a level which is beyond imagination. You have the full 3 hour. I've seen Shakespearean plays through puppets back in France at an international conference, and I was fascinated. Just amazing stuff. Yeah.
So, are you currently working on any project connected?
No. I am not. I don't do because it's very hard with all the other stuff at the moment. It takes away a lot of my time. I would love to do or teach a little bit out here to people, but time is always the problem now.
Actually, my following question is connected with this gamut of things that you do. How do you eke out time for painting? Yeah, you also paint. I understand.
Yes, I do a lot of painting. I do traditional media, a lot of oil and acrylics and stuff like that, watercolors. Painting, I cannot devote that much time that I'd like to. I would like to do much more because I really love painting. As I said, I do a lot of my work here. So, so even if I'm driving or sitting and doing some work, I'm thinking about if I want to do a painting, most of my work is done in my mind before I ever touch the canvas. So I'm hoping that I'm able to spend more time in painting in the future, in the coming years, because I really love to. Because concerts take away a fair bit of time because they need rehearsals and you have to coordinate with musicians and you have to, the songs and all that stuff. Painting, so it takes away time from me. I would rather have less concerts but start painting more. I'd love to do that. Hopefully, in a couple of years, 2 or 3 years.
Who are the kind of painters or paintings that you have always admired?
I'm not a big fan of abstract art. I'm not. I don't do abstract art. Maybe I've not been taught how to appreciate. I like realistic paintings.
Right.
Okay, and I love real life paintings, watercolors, and I've studied a bit of that. I have not done any formal training in painting or never been. I'm more of a born painter than a musician, so it's something that I think I was born with that stuff. But I've studied a lot of painting, but as I said, I love doing realistic paintings. That's my
That's your natural.
That's my love. Yeah, that's my love. Yes.
Right. Now, what about theatre? I gather that you're also in the process of writing a play. Your upcoming project is that you're in the process of writing short plays.
Short plays. I love short plays, and an evening of, let's say, 6 plays, for example. Back in France, I remember when I went there and performed at an international conference in a place called Charleville-Mézières in France. This is going back in the 80s. From India, we traveled there, and there I saw a theater from America. It was puppet theater. It's called the Bread and Puppet Theater. So they do a little performance, and they take a break, and they give out little pieces of bread and a bit of wine and bread and stuff like that, and then they start another one. So that kind of a thing then came to me, and I said, why can't we have that for theater, our theater? And so I wrote these short plays, not more than 15 to 20 minutes, not more than that. So you see a play, and then you take a break, go out and get a drink, or eat something, or carry a drink inside and sit down and watch the next play. That was my idea, and that's what I've written. Each play not more than 15-20 minutes. In each play completely different. So you can have a social play, you can have a murder mystery, you can have a comic play, you can have something, a horror story or something. So the audience gets all these emotions every 15 minutes after a break. And that's how I've written. So I've written quite a few plays now. I'm getting them translated to Hindi, and some I'll keep in English. And so I've written in English, so some of them. So hopefully we should do a production this year or early next year of all the plays in Sydney.
It's fantastic. Are you planning any performances in India? We'd love to watch.
India got so much talent, I would love to see my plays done by some fantastic, actors in India and directors. Hopefully, who knows what happens? It's all destiny, I guess.
True. Fair enough. Now, any particular plays or playwrights that you have a fondness for, you have a specific fondness for?
I've read a lot of George Bernard Shaw and Ibsen.
Mm-hmm.
So I've
Right.
read a lot of their plays, and they're masterful writers, you see.
Absolutely. Ibsen,
Absolutely
you're so right. So,
Yeah.
so nuanced and I think so ahead of his times. He's one of the
Oh,
foremost
yeah.
feminists,
Incredible.
I would say.
Yes, yes, absolutely incredible. So they have influence. I like I don't my plays won't have large monologues. No, I like them short dialogues, one after the other. So that's something I learned from them. Not having some other playwrights have these long monologues. Mine is I believe even in my writing, the paragraphs are not never big. They'll always be short and sweet. So some things you learn from these people. So I've done the same thing for plays now.
Right. Now, what has been the best compliment, considering your multiple interests? I'm sure you've got zillion compliments. What has been the compliment that has stayed with you over the years?
Well, in terms of art, you mean?
Any of your, be it your writing or for your singing or
It's
for
very
your
hard to say.
cartoons.
And one great compliment recently, somebody asked my wife, and he said that, oh, why don't you do what he does? And she said that, like, I speak through him. That's what she said. And that I thought was good. That was very nice. I thought, but yeah, look, compliments. Yeah, people come and have said a lot of things, but and they do, and I'm eternally thankful for those compliments. Whatever people say to me, eternally thankful. I don't deserve half of them, to be honest with you. I really don't. But I eternally people say
Honest.
people have written. It's very kind of them to write some good things about me. Very, very kind of them.
Who is your most trusted critic?
And my wife,
Okay.
yeah, she can tear me apart.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because when you go out in society and you display a painting, and people will always say, people are not that rude. People will always, if they don't like it, they'll say it's nice or a book or whatever.
Right.
But she's really would tell me straight to my face that this is not what you should do, or something that I do on stage, or said something, or some song I sang one after the other, and she said, you can't do that, you can't have those songs together, you split them out. Or she would read some of my scripts and say that I can't understand this, you've got to be more, this is too big and mighty, just make it simple. It's great.
True.
I need someone to tell me the truth.
Absolutely.
That's what it is.
What has been your publishing experience like? How easy or how challenging was it to get published?
It is always very challenging, and for any writer, I'm fortunate that I found an Australian publisher for my book.
Right.
It's very hard to get into this very, very competitive. India, of course, because of Santosh Bakaya, we found a publisher, which was very nice of her to approach a publisher, and I was very happy that. So some other publishers in India have shown interest in my works now. Hopefully, something will happen.
Is there
Otherwise,
another collection of cartoons coming up?
Yeah, I was thinking of doing. I've drawn hundreds and hundreds. If you look at my collection, and my daughter said that, why don't you put everything out into a coffee table book? All your cartoons, and there are hundreds I've drawn. I don't even remember so many. And that hopefully I should do that. I think it's worthwhile doing it, even for myself.
Okay. I think that would be a beautiful idea. I think a coffee table book of all your illustrations.
Yes.
All right. Now, any special message for viewers of the Writer Talks?
Message in terms of writing or creativity.
Viewers would be from all walks of life, and we'll also have writers, aspiring writers, established writers, so have eclectic viewership.
Yes, I mean, as I said for my paintings, and I say this to all creatives, that don't see, observe. Don't hear, listen. Okay, there's a difference. And if you are able to do these things properly, you'll be able to create a huge thing from nothing if you can only observe and listen properly. And a lot of writers, they just start writing. They sit down and say, "I'll write a story," and I say, don't do that. Just I know I don't do that. I don't expect people to do. If you want to write well, my message is that keep on observing, keep on listening, and keep on jotting. That's what you do. And then when a story comes along in your mind, take all those jottings and bring little bits and pieces together to build a story. It becomes more interesting. Also, I have a habit of writing end first. People write top. I write bottom up most of my stuff. I know what I want in the end, and I build everything around it.
Okay. That's really working backwards in a different way. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Now, one final question. Actually, I was thinking of this as I was listening to you speak. You said art is a way of life, and I completely agree with you. And it's really beautiful to be able to do that. But despite many people having genuinely been talented, they will not be able to do this because it's not monetized. And how do you think one should go about this and negotiate this?
It is very hard. I always tell my students, I said, look, if all my peers or my friends who are in this business, I said it's always good to keep your day job on. It's a fact of life.
Sure.
Keep your day job, because to monetize art is one of the hardest things in this world. And if you don't, even if you're very gifted, very talented, don't think. The success rate in terms of money, finance is possibly 0.5% among the creatives.
True.
So that's how it is.
That's the harsh
reality. It's a harsh reality. The average income of writers in Australia is $12,000, $15,000 a year. So which is, in Australian terms, it's nothing. And so that's how it is, and it's a fact of life. You have to understand and accept it as a creative. It doesn't matter if you're a writer, if you're a creative, you must understand this, that to monetize your skills in this area of creativity is very, very hard. And your chances of success in terms of money is a rare commodity, to be honest. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. It was really, really an honor to talk to you, meet with you on this platform, and thank you for taking the time out for Writer Talks.
My pleasure, Asha, anytime. Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
And all the best for your upcoming ventures, and hope to see you soon again.
Definitely we will, and looking forward to another interview. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Ahoy.
Bye.